say, have you cleared this story with your wife?
She knows the story. I say it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So I tell it to a lot.
Hello and welcome to the DevOps Roundup. In this episode, we're changing things up a little bit, and we're definitely a number of episodes into our podcast, and we haven't really introduced ourselves and who the heck we are. We're kind of relying on people knowing us from other venues, other podcasts, and
the like.
things like that. Yeah. So today I'd like to start by getting to know Alex and asking Alex some interview type questions and see how we go from there. So,
am I interviewing for a job, or
you could interview for anything you like.
As long as you don't make me do a linked list in public, we're fine.
There will be no programming quiz at this.
Okay.
Her programming.
Why are manholes round?
Yeah. I think you already know the answer to that one. That's cheating. Yeah. So one of my
before we get too far, remind everybody to hit that subscribe button.
Oh, I think you're the expert at reminding people to like and subscribe. I still feel awkward saying that because I'm not a veteran YouTuber like you are.
Yeah, 3 years of it's almost natural now.
So I see, I watch YouTube a lot and I hear that on every video, and yet I still feel awkward saying it.
When people just like and subscribe,
yeah.
You have to. You'd be surprised how many people skip right through it and don't subscribe. You got to tell them stop. Hit that subscribe button.
Well, we should have a pop-up graphic that does that for us, and we'll have to search for that. And
we just need to get a cute little rubber ducky to go stop, quack quack, subscribe.
I should ask. I should find someone to animate that for us. That would be cool. So, all right. Well, so one of my normal opening questions at an interview is, tell me about yourself.
Oh, Sean, that's like we got 30 minutes for these. The year was 19.
I don't need to go back.
Not that far back.
First, the Earth cooled, and then the dinosaurs died, and then they became oil. But let's catch us up to you. You're finishing up college. You're looking for your first
job. Okay. Job. Well, so I got a degree in computer engineering, minor in computer science from one of the Cal States here in California. Met my lovely wife there as well. Same degree, same major, same everything. She's just a little bit older than me. And in 2010, I got an opportunity to go do a NSF internship type of thing. The National Science Foundation.
Okay, yeah.
Not NSFW. I just said NSF. The National Science Foundation.
All right.
And there was like some grant, and there was these summer programs, and it was like go spend like 10 weeks in somewhere in New Jersey, I think it was. And I was like, that sounds cool. And I applied and I got in. Then I ended up.
But you don't remember spending any time in New Jersey?
Well, I never made it that far because like within a week or two of me getting that job or that internship, I ran into something called Inroads, which is a program. I don't know that it exists still, but it's a program that would place minorities in like big local companies in and around LA. Mm-hmm. And so this particular program, I applied to that, got into that, and I had an opportunity to interview with the Boeing company, hence the Boeing.
Oh, you got their shirt on today.
Yeah, Boeing gave me so much freaking clothes. I have like half my closet is Boeing. I used to wear my Boeing shirts to Northrop, and they'd be like, what the heck? I'm like, the moment you start giving me Northrop shirts, I will wear Northrop shirts.
And then they never did.
They never did. So Boeing it is.
Yeah, I find a lot of those companies, they want you to buy their merch.
Yeah, Boeing would reward you. So every time that you did something well, you got like Boeing bucks, right? And they were redeemable at the employee store. And so when my wife and I, when we finally left Boeing, we had like $1,000 worth of, so we went crazy and bought a lot of Boeing clothing.
Loaded up on the t-shirts. Yeah.
That and towards my tail end of my career at Boeing, I used to help run the education, the K-12 program, to teach kids how to become engineers local to St. Louis. And the head of the program, she had a shirt for every event, so she just gave me shirts every time we had an event.
That's cool.
So
did you go directly to St. Louis?
So no, well, that's kind of where I started, right? So I got into this inroads program, and I got an opportunity to interview with Boeing, and the hiring manager lived in Anaheim. And as well, this community probably doesn't know, but the Atlassian community definitely knows that I live in Anaheim. And so there's an old Fry's Electronics. Have you ever been to a Fry's Electronics?
I loved Fry's.
Have you heard of the legendary Fry's?
I have. That was the first and last thing I always did when I visited California and Vegas. Vegas had a Fry's, and
every single one of them were unique.
It was a day of mourning.
I went the day they announced it, and they were already closed. I'm like, guys, you didn't even give us like a heads up. Like, there was no store going out. I mean, granted, by the time
rented a box truck and backed it up to the place, and
no. By the time I went, like, Fry's was basically dead at that point. Yeah, we had gone like a few weeks before, and there was like nothing in stock.
Yeah, roughly a year before it was kind of sad going into Fry's, and it's like,
right. Well, the Fry's is significant because my hiring manager worked at Boeing, right? Obviously, because he was interviewing me. But Boeing used to have a huge presence across the street from Fry's. In fact, the Fry's local to my house used to be a Boeing building way back in like the 60s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So but Boeing, well, it was like Rockwell International or something like that back in the day. Sure. Acquisitions, how they happen. So it ended up being in Boeing's property. In fact, fun fact, my church is actually also a former Boeing property and across the street from that Fry's.
If I was ever across the street from a Fry's, I would have been bankrupt.
Probably. So I interviewed at Fry's, and this position was to be a software engineer, and this was like I was getting a degree in engineering, and it was very IT, very network centric as well. That's kind of what got me into networks for the first time. But I cheated a little bit. So the hiring manager called me up, and he's like, "Hey, my current intern goes to Long Beach to my university." And he's like, "Talk to him." And I used to be the president of some of the student clubs. And so I basically put out somebody go find me this person. And that afternoon, or that evening, really, like around 7 or 8 p.m., some guy walks in and he's like, "I got like 10 people telling me that I got to come see you."
You looking for me?
Yeah. And so my network has been very, very strong since back then. And so I talked to him, I interviewed with him, and he basically gave me the lowdown on what the job was. So when I showed up to the interview, I basically knew what the job was. So I took out somebody from Berkeley, and I took out somebody from UCLA who were also competing for the job, and I ended up getting it because of the network that I had. And so the rest is history. So I worked at Boeing. I did my internship with Boeing for 2 years. After that, I finally graduated and got my degree, and I joined, interestingly enough, Mark Cruz from the Atlassian community. He was in the same program as me, which is Boeing had this IT rotation program. Mm-hmm. And so I did a year of that in databases. Okay. But my second rotation was I got introduced into the LAMP stack. Is that what it was called back then? Linux, Apache, MySQL, right? And PHP. Yep. LAMP stack. So that's what got me the first time into
I like to say Perl for the P, but
okay. Yeah, well, mine was PHP for this particular. But that's what got me into like the world of DevOps, at least the early onset of DevOps, at least from what it was back in 2012, 2013. Mm-hmm. And so that's what introduced me to Linux, and I got hooked on Linux. I'm like, this Linux stuff is cool. Because I also almost failed my C++ class. I was all on Linux, and I didn't know. Like, I remember walking into my C++ class with Linux. I'm like, what happened to the mouse? Because my first C++ was in Visual Studio. My second one was all in the terminal. And they did not do a good job at translating.
Sure, yeah.
I almost failed that class just because I couldn't figure out how to write code. Not because I didn't know how to code, but because I couldn't literally figure out the I for insert and work the terminal.
So for VI and stuff like that?
Yeah, that was the reason why I failed that dumb class. Not even the linked list and all the other stuff that you had to learn. But anyway, so I'm doing this LAMP stack stuff and learning PHP, learning MySQL and all that stuff and Apache, and it was great. I finished my first year in that rotation, and then Boeing announced that they were going to move everybody from Southern California and Washington, for that matter, Washington State, to either St. Louis or Charleston, South Carolina. And so I told my boss, I was like, you know what? I don't want to move. And so I was like, I'm going to start looking. also, to add complexity, Boeing started paying for my master's in systems engineering at USC, which was a $50,000 master's at the time. And so I was one semester in, so I'm like, I might as well call it quits now because I only owe $5,000 as opposed to $50,000. And so as I'm walking out, my manager's like, "How would you like to move to St. Louis?" And I'm like, "Didn't I just tell you I want to not move to St. Louis?" And he's like, "Well, our Team Foundation server guy, who's in charge of all Visual Studio and Team Foundation server for the entire Boeing company, he's in a similar boat as you. He's got to move to St. Louis, and he already resigned. He's going to go work for Microsoft." And this guy wrote 4 books on how to use Visual Studio.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And so he's like, he's resigning. He's going to go work for Microsoft. And the job's yours if you want it. And I'm like, really? Like, I just graduated from college like 12 months prior, like 18 months prior. And he's like, yeah, we'll bump you up from a level 1 to a level 3, give you a nice pay bump. And you'll be in charge of Team Foundation server for the whole company. So I took it. First I went home, told the wife, told my mom. Both of them told me, do whatever you want. I quickly learned that does not mean do whatever you want.
Exactly, yeah.
So that was that lesson. And so I moved to St. Louis to be in charge of Team Foundation server. And so that was my first foray into like real true DevOps, because now we're doing Visual Studio, we're doing testing, and we were setting up all the infrastructure for the development at Boeing to work off of TFS. And I would do all the top level support for it, and then manage Visual Studio as well, and set up like coding best practices and story, like, and then there was a whole agile component to it, because by that point.
So what's your biggest horror story maintaining TFS for such a large organization?
So one day, it's funny you say that. I have a great story. I was actually going to get into it. So one day, I wake up in the morning and SharePoint is down. Okay. And you're like, well, what does TFS have to do with SharePoint? Well, they were on the same server. They were on the same server, so SharePoint went down, so TFS kind of went down with it, right? And I remember I was the guy who was in charge of making sure that the lights stayed on. And after an hour of like troubleshooting, I still had like another person who was kind of like, he was senior and tenured, but he was those kind of guys like, I'm really good at my job, but I don't want to do any of this management crap. So just let me code and do my thing. So I relied on him a lot. So I wasn't like flying solo where I'm like, because I'm at this point, I'm like 2-3 months into the job, right?
Sure.
And so SharePoint and TFS go down, and we jump on a $500 an hour call with Microsoft like tech support to get this thing back up. 17 hours later, we get it back up. And I remember just not sleeping for 17, like it was a 17-hour shift that I pulled. And the worst part about all that is, at the end of the day, because we managed TFS for the whole company and SharePoint for that matter for the whole company, we were fielding a lot of tickets because everybody's like, what the heck, I can't do any work today, right? And so the guy that was in charge of like telling everybody, please hold, he got accolades for his monumental achievement of how well he handled the queue. And my senior manager pulled me into her office and told me what the heck happened, and just scolded me for letting it break. And my naive answer at 22 years old that I was at the time was, you fired the guy that could have fixed this in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well, you left that part out. Who's this guy?
His name's Jeff Levingston.
Oh, I don't know if we needed to drop names. But
would you?
You didn't mention that there was a person that got fired before.
Oh no, he didn't get fired. He willingly walked away from the job to go to Microsoft.
Oh, that right? Guy. Okay, same.
Yeah. But in essence, it was a firing because they moved the job, right? They knew he wasn't going to move.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's one of those like planned layoffs or forced layoffs where you voluntarily move. Yeah. But in essence, it was a firing because had they not announced that they were moving these jobs, he would have still been at Boeing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Companies do that from time to time, and they shuffle offices around, and like, hey, if you don't live within so many miles of the office, you need to relocate. But they're expecting that a certain percentage isn't going to play ball, and that's how they lay off without laying off.
Yeah. So I got TFS back up. Everything was great. I got scolded for some reason, even though I don't think. I mean, the interesting part is the solution to fix the problem happened within 2 hours of us jumping on a call with Microsoft. But Microsoft's like, nah, it can't be that. And fast forward 15 hours later, that's exactly what it was. And I'm like, guys, we could have saved 15 hours here. But anyway, so because of I got in so much trouble and I was so young and naive and just didn't know, I was like, you know what, I don't want to do this because like I had so much responsibility and so much stress, and like I didn't get paid that much more. Right. And I was still getting paid like half of what the other guy was getting paid to do the same job that he went to go Microsoft to make double what Boeing was paying him. So I'm doing this for like a quarter at the money at this point, right? And so I started applying. I went over to the exchange team, and I was managing email for all 100. I think at the time it was like 175,000 employees.
That's a lot.
So I was their scripter. So I was their only programmer, and I learned how to automate there. So there's where I got introduced to PowerShell, and I got introduced to how to pipe and get really good with like just PowerShell in general as a scripting language or as a scripting thing. And I learned how to automate all these things, and I automated all these processes, and that's the first time where automation came like big into my life as an exchange administrator. That job though required me to be on call because email couldn't go down, right?
Sure.
And so I wouldn't call it a near-death experience, but my wife at the time I got greedy. So what happened was I was in St. Louis when I moved to the exchange team. Interestingly enough, so by this time the exchange team was 2015 when I joined. End of 2014, like December 2014, January 2015, the hiring manager that was my manager in the exchange team was the manager that hired me in 2011 to start as a full-time employee in 2012. Oh. And so he's like, I know you're a California guy. Like, do you want to go back? But I messed up, and like literally 2 weeks before my wife got a full-time job at Boeing too. Cleared and on site. Yeah. I'm like, I dropped the ball. Like
how are you gonna juggle this one?
Yeah. So I was like, nah, I'm stuck here. Because at that point, my wife, she hadn't worked for like three years, and she was talking to the walls, and I'm like, it's time for you to go get a job. After our firstborn. And so she got a job like in 2 minutes in St. Louis, because apparently you just need to know how to speak English and have a heartbeat in St. Louis. The bars are much lower outside of California, I'll tell you that much, when it comes to a job. So fast forward, she's on site, she doesn't drive. I'm working 24-hour days for a week and very sleep deprived, and things were getting a little iffy with the driving back and forth, right? Yeah. And so I told my wife, I'm like, you know what? Let me just get a job that's also on site and cleared. And that way, like, at least we have the same schedule.
Yeah.
And so I left Exchange and I joined, I became now a titled software engineer. And there I was managing Jenkins.
Okay.
And so I got brought in to do all the builds, and I basically became a build engineer. And I was doing Jenkins and just managing all the builds and loading the software on the aircrafts and stuff like that. But that was cleared, and that was now software engineering. And I got out of IT and into engineering, although I feel like I was doing more IT work now. And life was good until we hit our first snowstorm that we had to like deal with, because all this other time we just stayed at home.
So it didn't snow for the first few years?
It did, but I didn't have to leave my house. I can work from home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so now is the first time
they made you relocate to St. Louis, but they let you work from home.
Whenever there's a snowstorm.
You could have worked from home from California.
Not when you were cleared. Well,
no, true.
Yeah. So it got serious when I got cleared. And yeah, so the whole thing with California and me being in St. Louis, yeah, I could work from home, but I needed to have my office in St. Louis for headcount.
Yeah.
But I would spend most of my time in California still.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so once I got cleared, I was stuck there, and then the snowstorm, and I told my mom, you know what, this is it. Nope, we're not doing this anymore. And so we actively started looking to get out of California, to get out of St. Louis and back to California. But there's always some strategy with me, Sean. And so we were gonna have our second kid, and our kid was due on well, let me back it up. Boeing, since they paid for my master's, I graduated May 15, 2015.
Okay.
And so to now repay back that $50,000, I had to wait 24 months. So my date was May 15, 2017. Right? That's the day I could quit Boeing and I can walk away from it and I can get back. This snowstorm that we're talking about was February of 2016.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, a year too early. Yeah.
Yeah, a year and a few months too early.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened was we ended up getting pregnant around April of 2016. And we're like, well, that accelerated the program because my wife, we're both engineers. So we're like, May 15, 2017, take away 9 months. And then it took us 4 months to get pregnant with the first one. So we gave ourselves 4 months to get pregnant with the second one. Well, apparently nobody told us that it's a lot easier to get pregnant a second time.
So we'll pause for one second. Have you cleared this story with your wife?
She knows the story. I say it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So I tell it to a lot. So mathematically, we had it all figured out so that the baby would be born when I could walk, where I was free from Boeing, and we could move back to California and not have a baby in the Midwest. Okay. Well, again, we were 4 months ahead of schedule.
What's wrong with having kids in the Midwest?
Have you lived in the Midwest?
Well, yeah, I live in Denver, so we're not really Midwest and we're not really West.
Yeah.
So.
Nothing's wrong. I just there's nothing wrong with the Midwest.
I'm picking on you because
no. The true reason was we wanted our family support a network, right? Yeah. And we were alone in St. Louis. There was nobody that we knew other than neighbors in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And so we knew that if we were gonna have a second kid, we wanted our family and mom and grandma and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And so we knew we wanted to go back, but again, we were just ahead of schedule by 4 months. Now, out of pure luck, one day I got a buddy of mine. We're in our closed area, and he walks in a suit. And this is a guy that would go to Boeing, who's kind of semi-formal in shorts and a t-shirt. And I'm like, why are you all dressed up today? It was a Friday. It was casual Friday. I give it to you, but still, it was like he was too casual. I mean, so he was too anti-casual, like literally dressed up in a suit. And he's like, oh, Northrop Grumman's across the street, just giving out jobs.
Handing out jobs, huh?
He's handing out jobs. And he's like, you want one? I'll get like 10 grand if you go.
Also, now he's a recruiter now.
He's a recruiter because they were giving out bonuses for cleared employees. Uh-huh. Yeah. He's like, if you refer a cleared person, then we'll give you a bonus. Oh, so great. I was like, yeah, send me an invite. So he sent me an invite. I go across the street. And this is, remember you were asking me, like, what did they ask me? I'm like, they literally asked me, like, do I want to move to California and do I know how to fix problems?
Yeah.
That was it. And then they're like, great. And then the lady's like, go talk to the recruiter outside and negotiate your salary. So I went out there, I gave him my salary, and then they're like, then they said, okay, cool. And so like a day later, I get a job, and then I sat on it for like a week, and the recruiter calls me up. He's like, well, you haven't accepted this job. What's going on? I'm like, well, my wife also works. And his first question, like, is she cleared? I'm like, yeah. Like, oh, that's not a problem.
So you got her a job too. Yeah.
So we got her a job. And they got the offer letter. This is a funny story. So I got the offer letter, and they gave me exactly what I wanted. But if you're following along with the mathematics, this is happening in 2016. This is August now of 2016. Mm-hmm. I am free from Boeing in May of 2017. So I still have some runway left. Mm-hmm. And so the guy's like, what's the problem? I'm like, well, I owe like 15 grand. He's like, oh, no worries. We'll give you 20 to leave. I'm like, okay. So I do some back of the napkin math, and I'm like, well, after tax is going to be a little less, but we'll be fine. Well, I mean, like, I don't mind paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, whatever the delta is. So I'm like, I'll take it. They got my wife a job. I got a job. We got $100,000 relocation package.
That's a big package. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big package. And so I was like, we'll do it. We'll sign the dotted line. The guy calls me within 20 minutes. He's like, I'm such an idiot. I forgot to say thank you for taking the job. Let's just make the bonus an even 30.
What? Wow. So I wonder if he was expecting
the negotiation or something.
Well, yeah, for Boeing to counter, and then he would have to counter the counter.
Yeah, maybe. But Boeing. So interesting enough, Northrop went and took like 500 people from Boeing that month.
Yeah.
Because Boeing. So this was for the B-21 bomber, the one that what did they call it, Raider?
I don't remember.
There's a new bomber that got basically it was a $50 billion contract that Boeing and Northrop went head to head for, and you have to as you may or may not know, but you have to be staffed for when the contract is awarded, right? So Boeing hired a bunch of people, and now had an influx of people that didn't have a job, and Northrop's like, well, we got the contract, so they set up shop at a bar. And the coolest part of this whole story was, I grew up with my professors from Castle and Long Beach. They worked at Hughes Aircraft and TRW and all these like legacy aerospace companies, and Douglas and McDonald, right? Like before they're all merged together. Rocketdyne, right?
Aerojet.
All these legacy companies. And they did the same thing in the 60s where they're like, oh yeah, we would just go we would go to a bar after we got laid off, and like recruiters would pick us up at a bar. And I got to do that experience like 40 years later. Yeah. So, but I like to tell people I got a job at a bar.
That is a good story.
But so anyway, so that gets me to St. Louis. So out of St. Louis back to California. But the problem was the lady's like, do you want to go to El Segundo or LAX, or do you want to go to San Diego? And my butt was, knowing that I already had the job, I don't know why I said these words, but I'm like, where do you work? She's like, well, I'm in San Diego. I'm like, well, that's where I'm going, because I wanted to make sure I got the job.
Okay.
And so I went to San Diego instead of landing back in LA. And so I went.
San Diego's nicer than around LAX.
Oh yeah. I ended up not regretting it, but it cost this move that where I live now, because I had to get out of San Diego. Had I moved to LAX from the get-go, then it probably would have been easier.
Possibly, yeah.
It would have been cheaper, because I bought my house in 2016 for just $600,000 and I sold it for $1.2 million.
Yeah. So you might not have had that bump if you went directly to LA and then just stayed in LA.
Probably not. So
kind of gave you a slingshot to
it worked. It all ended up working, but both my wife and I were in San Diego. We were there for a few years, but when that very first job, that's when I got introduced to Jira and TeamCity and Sonar Cube and all of the DevOps tools and VMware tools for vSphere and Horizon and all these other like DevOps centric tools, right?
The earlier virtualization tools.
Yeah. So I jumped on that team, and I got it because, again, I had the TFS background, the version 1 background, the Jenkins background at Boeing. And so that got me into Jira. And so I did that for like almost 2 years at Northrop. And then one day I'm at the gym, and this guy is at the gym, this much elderly senior person. And we started chatting, and he's a systems engineer. Right.
Okay.
And he's like, what do you do? And I told him like what I do with the DevOps and stuff. And he's like, oh, what's your degree? And I told him it's in systems engineering. He's like, well, why aren't you a systems engineer? I'm like, well, I've never had an opportunity to become a systems engineer. And he's like, oh, we can fix that. And I was so curious, because by this point it's 2018, almost 2019.
Okay.
And I got my systems engineering degree in 2015, and I never touched the field of systems engineering.
Yeah.
And I started college. I started my master's August of 2012. My firstborn was born in April of 2012.
Okay.
So very small, basically the summer. And then it was work 40 hours and go to school 40 hours for the next 2.5 years. So I never got to hold my baby. I never got to see the baby. I never got to do anything with the baby. And so I told them, I'm like, you know what? I do want to become a systems engineer because I want to know if it was worth that opportunity cost, right? Because I knew what I had lost to get the degree. And so I went, and the first thing my manager tells me, he's like, well, the government's coming over tomorrow. We're gonna have a week-long session. So pick yourself up a new wardrobe on the way home. So engineers not unlike IT and DevOps, where you're more like casual jeans and a button down. Like, these people meant serious business. It was suit and tie.
So at that point, you decided, nah, you didn't want
No, I took it. I took it. I went and bought the wardrobe, and I went and I did it. And then I was doing my first assignment was to update the markings on an aircraft of where the customer could put their logo.
Okay.
And it was a PowerPoint. And I remember sending this one to my chief engineer. He's like, what the heck is this? I'm like, it's a PowerPoint you requested. He's like, have you not ever made a PowerPoint? I was like, no, I was in Jira the whole time. I was in TeamCity. I was like in technical tools. I wasn't making PowerPoints.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is my first PowerPoint I make. He's like, no, you got to go to PowerPoint University because we're PowerPoint engineers here. So I found out that a systems engineer is really just truly a PowerPoint engineer.
Yeah.
So
how long did you keep that?
So that job will again, this is now in either the tail end of 2018 or the early 2019, and it's going well because I'm a systems engineer and I'm living the dream now. And one day my manager, I got a new manager, and he's like, how do we do career development for you? I'm like, stable. I want to be stable. I want to keep the same job for the next 50 years. I'm retiring in this job. He's like, do you want to go to school? I'm like, nope. I got the master's. I got the degrees. I have certificates. I'm a certified ethical hacker. I got security. I'm like, I just want to do a job and not change, because up to this point, I had done a different job every year since 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get promoted because I had so much instability. And so I'm like, I just want to be stable. And like 2 weeks later, they put me on a new program. And this new program, I'm a project manager at that point, still with the systems engineering title, but really just doing project management.
Okay.
Scratch that. Really program management, because as a systems engineer, you're in charge of seeing the whole picture. So I work with the testers, I work with the designers, the requirement engineers, the customer themselves, human resource, not human resource, human factors, and UAT testing and all the testings. So I was making sure that all of it coordinated, and we were working out of Excel. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, if only there was a better tool to track all this work. So I introduced this whole program to Jira.
Okay.
And pulled them onto Jira, and then I started being very effective with Jira. And at around that time, the program was so far behind schedule that they brought this lady in. She was a director from a Black program, like basically not open to the public. Nobody knows these Black programs, right? Yeah. And so they brought her out, and she comes in, and all of a sudden, these like 10 to 12 people start showing up at our meetings. And the premise was, oh, they're just flies on the wall. They're part of the homeroom. We had at Northrop, they have this weird thing where you have a manager who's in charge of their day to day, but then because for your engineering classification, you then have like a support group that is there to manage your career.
Sure. Yeah.
And so these people were from the homeroom. They were there to just, because all the different engineering disciplines have to work together, they were there to just make sure that any resources they needed from a career perspective, that they were available, but they weren't there to be. The homeroom was just a front, because in the Black program they were the aerospace engineer, they were the GNC engineer, they were the software engineer, they were the test engineer, but they came out as a homeroom and then basically embedded themselves because they were experts in all the topics already, and like pink slipped everybody out. Really? Yeah, took every lead out and they popped themselves in like after a month. Oh, and wow. They kept me because I was doing the Jira thing, and I was like, look at all the metrics, look at all the dashboards, look at where all the roadblocks are. And they're like, we need you. Everybody else, bye. and so I got taken under the wing of one of these guys, and it was awesome until I had a meet the Fockers moment.
Okay.
And I remember being in a closed room one time, and basically he's like, circle. You remember that Robert De Niro scene where he's like, he draws a circle? Have you ever seen Meet the Fockers?
I have. I don't remember.
But Robert De Niro and the Ben Stiller character, they're always at opposite ends, right?
Yes.
But Robert De Niro's like that military type of guy, and he's like, he drew a circle to Ben Stiller. He's like, here's my family, here's you. You're outside the circle, right? Yeah. And so I had a moment where like she basically drew a circle, and she's like, everybody in this room is in the circle, right? And everybody in her, because this was her team, they were willing to take bullets for her. And so if you were in it, you had to take the bullet with her. And so we ended up playing bad cop, good cop with a bunch of people, get a bunch of people to do what we wanted them to do. And I was starting to get some ethical borderlines, and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable doing this. And so that's why I'm like, you know what? I've learned how to be very effective as a program manager. Let me see if I can be as effective in a company where my opinion matters. Because Northrop was like 100,000 person company. Sure. And so I went down to a small little startup in San Diego. That's the 300 person company. You're like, that's not
yeah,
the one you picked me on. And so I went over there, and I found out that high school never ends. And it doesn't matter if you're in 100,000 people or 300 people.
Or drama. 40 years old.
Yeah, you got drama, like toxic culture. If you have that cowboy we talked in that last episode, they're just gonna ruin the whole thing for everybody. Yeah. And you really need a place that believes in teamwork and believes in the greater good.
Yeah, we'll have to do another episode on different personas in software development, because we really focused on the cowboy on that one. There's a number of other personas that we didn't even bring up, but just just an aside to interrupt on you, because this has been good. I've asked really one question, and we've gone on for more than 30 minutes.
Well, I'm almost done.
So release team, DevOps tool specialists. We provide professional services and software reselling around the leading software DevOps tools like Atlassian, GitLab, GitHub, JFrog, and others. To talk with us about DevOps, here's our contact information. Please call 866-887-0489 or via email at info@releaseteam.com.
Well, I'm almost done. I'm at this point, we're in 2020. And
okay.
So we're almost
only 5 years away.
Yeah, we're only 5 years away. So so I'm doing this job in this small little 300-person company. Pandemic hits on day one. And they basically, well, my first day was the first day of lockdown. So I went in, they asked me like, have you done foreign travel or anything? I was like, no. And so I go in and I get my laptop and they're like, go home. We'll see you in 2 weeks. That didn't happen.
Yeah. You saw them in a year, right?
Yeah, basically. And so I worked from home and things were cool, except my manager lived really close and I live kind of far from this office. I didn't care when I initially took the job because it was on the way. Like I had to drop off my wife and then I would keep going. But COVID changed the whole thing up because my wife was in a skiff in a closed area. And so she always had to go to the office and I didn't. And so now I'm going back and forth again, doing the whole commute. And it was just like taking a toll on me again. And so my year performance, the manager gave me a fail to meet expectations because I was not in the office testing the code on the robot. And I got my first F in my career ever. Even though as a program manager that I was, we went from doing 3 software deliveries a year to 18 the year that I was there. And we pushed out more code and made more changes and had higher efficiency gains ever. But I wasn't reading the PRs. I wasn't in the PRs. I wasn't writing code. I wasn't doing things that were not in my job description, but they were my manager's wish list.
Yeah, it's his expectations that.
Yeah. And so I felt his.
Ones, yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like I did a great job as a program manager, but I failed to meet his expectations. And so they didn't fire me. They put me on another team in which I started excelling and doing pretty good over there because now I knew what the expectation was. But by that time, I told my wife, I'm like, you know what? I really want to go do this YouTube stuff because I had been wanting to do YouTube since like 2014, and it's been 7 years at this point. And my wife she's like, well, I have a very stable job. You can't get fired from defense when you're cleared, right? Especially when you're in a skiff and every butt counts. And so she's like, why don't you go? Why don't you leave? I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I got the insurance, I got the money, and I had saved up, and my wife and I don't know if I told you, but my wife and I, since we got married in 2010, we've always lived off of just one paycheck. So our expenses have never exceeded one check. Yeah. So for, I don't know, 10 years at that point, 12 years, we've saved saved a lot of checks. So I told my wife, I'm like, all right, let's go do it. And so I walk out April 1st of 2021, and I'm kind of like picking up little jobs here and there, not really knowing what to do. I did some cybersecurity stuff because that's what I thought I was gonna do. But then I picked up Jira and I started doing Jira consulting. And fast forward to Memorial Day. This is why the Summer of Atlassian, which I'm kicking off Monday, is so important to me because I remember being
so funny. It's almost summer already.
Yeah. Summer of Atlassian starts on Monday, and so I remember being in my parents' front yard with my dad's 1993 pickup truck that you may have seen in the driveway. I remember sitting on that truck with the tailgate down and telling my wife, I'm like, okay, so I've been out of work for almost 2 months. I made like $5,000 in that time frame, but nothing sustainable. So I told him, like, if I don't make $10,000 by Labor Day, I'll go back. I'll just go get a job again. She's like, all right. And so that was Monday, the Memorial Day, right? And so that Wednesday, that girl that followed me at Teams last year, that she was following me, she calls me and
I know
me.
what you're talking about. None of the viewers know, but yeah.
So there's this lady. I'm on Upwork, and this is how I'm getting the majority of my money in Upwork. And this woman calls me. She hires me. I'm like, I'm kind of new to Upwork, so I call her back, and I'm like, I don't think that's how it works. Like, you're supposed to like put the contract. I'm supposed to bid on it. You're supposed to then interview me. But she went straight to like, you're hired. And she's like, well, can you do the job or not? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well then that's all I need. Go do it. So that thing was for $9,000.
Okay.
So I was like, whoa, crap.
1,000 short. Yeah.
I'm 1,000 short, and I'm 3 days into this 100-day journey. And then the very next day, another gentleman sends me a direct message on Upwork, and he's like, I'd like to chat with you. And so I'm like, okay. And so he's like, here's my contract. I work at Carrier. Would you like to help us out? I need somebody extensively until at least the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Part-time, just 20 hours a week. And so, but we interviewed, and I thought I failed the interview. This gentleman, he had a guy in his team called Ron. His name was Ronnie, and I bombed it. I had no idea what the hell a field context was.
Okay.
No idea. And he asked me, I'm like, I don't know what a field context is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I bombed the interview, but the guy called me up and he's like, you're passed. You did great. I'm hiring you. I like your approach. And so he hired me. So that was basically like another $3,000 to $4,000 a month until Christmas.
Sure.
And so I'm like, well, that basically reassured me that I wasn't going back to get a regular job.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into Jira, doing one client that we're still friends and I still work with her. Mm-hmm. And this is how I got into Carrier. Fast forward a little bit more, end of 2021, Carrier ended up hiring me full-time. And I was at Carrier from basically June 2021 until March 3rd of this year that I left Carrier. Mm-hmm. To then try this all alone.
So now you're 100% Mr. YouTube. Yeah.
Mr. YouTube, content creation, and here's how we got to today.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So one question, 41 minutes. that was great. So
that's my life in 41 minutes.
Yeah. So what is your biggest hurdle with Jira other than, not knowing what a field context was? What
back then or now?
Any time. What is
So I'm always scared of like the unknown parts that I don't know about Jira, and data center scares me a lot. So I actively try to stay away from it because I like, as much as I love Jira and as much as I portray that I'm really good at Jira, help me out here. That scripting thing that we have.
The scripting thing?
The script runner.
Oh, script runner.
Yeah, that scares the crap out of me.
That's where I live.
I quiver.
Yeah.
I quiver at script runner, not because I don't think I'm not good at it, but because I feel like I have to learn it. And so my biggest fear right now is everything I have to learn. And I don't know why, because I've learned Jira so well, but I'm scared to learn and fail at new things, which is why when we said let's do the DevOps, I'm like, that's a great opportunity, because that's why I started the YouTube channel for Jira. Because 3.5 years ago, I was in the exact same boat. I'm like, how am I going to teach people Jira when I don't know Jira that well? Mm-hmm. And so I invested 12 hours a day on learning how to use Jira to the point where I mastered Jira. And I did it, and then I made the YouTube channel to document the 12-hour learnings and then put it on the internet. So I figured, well, let's do DevOps so that I can now force myself to learn Git properly and learn how to freaking merge branches properly without screwing up all the code. And I feel like it's the best way to learn, right? So right now, I embrace every way I could possibly fail. And my perspective on failure has changed a lot. I watched this podcast with one of the early folks at Facebook, and he said he spent like $1 million recently learning on an experiment that didn't pan out for him. And he wasn't phased by, I mean, granted, he's got like $4 billion, but he wasn't phased. He's like, oh, I just spent $1 million to learn how not to do it that way. And so I've been embracing failures a lot more, and I'm kind of putting myself out in situations that can make me fail more.
Yeah. Well, that's insightful. No, that is a very mature attitude, and yeah, it's there are so many people that have stalled in their career because they're not willing to attempt to do something because anticipating failure. And
what is it? Debilitating would be the word. It's paralyzing when you're scared, right? When you're scared, you won't do it, and you get comfortable with your job, but you can't get better just being comfortable.
Yeah, you need to challenge yourself. So,
and it's easier said than done. And I think we're in an era of the internet where you can publicly grow online and make a living, like streaming and stuff like this, and still get better and learn.
It is a lot of effort, though. To put to continue to produce videos, and you're doing numbers, multiple videos a week on your channel. We're trying to at least do one a week here. And I find that it's a lot of effort and time to do it. So, but I feel it's rewarding, and I'm waiting for the avalanche of commenters to start giving us a hassle. Yeah, grief. It's coming.
I think once we start putting how-to, so one of the biggest things that we learned on the Jira Life is people want how-to content.
Mm-hmm.
So I think once we start creating a little bit more on the how-to branch in Jira or in Git, right,
Git or other DevOps tools, which I think is coming. We're going to run out of the friendly banter back and forth weekly and describing things, which I think has been a good start. And we're going to have to get deep into certain tools and do how-tos and things like that.
And I'm personally dragging my feet with them too, because again, that uncertainty of like, I don't feel like I have good coding skills. I feel like I don't have good DevOps skills, but that's part of the allure, I guess. Right? It's part of we're gonna get better over time, and I got an expert in the room.
So, well, I could ask more questions, but I think we should wrap it. I think that was a great backstory and history of Alex Ortiz.
One that doesn't even go on my main channel.
So, but I'm sure we can split this up into many 3-minute bites.
Yeah,
and you can throw it on your main channel too.
One time, like 2 years ago, some Agile expert interviewed me, and he's like, "We got the origin story out, but he never published it."
Oh, really?
He just let his channel die and stuff, and so he has the recording, but he never published it. So I don't know that I've ever gotten that detailed into that origin story.
All right. Well, everybody, like and subscribe. That eventually may actually sound. I may be able to make that sound naturally at some point, but not forced. You do a much better job than I do at that. But yeah, that's a wrap on this episode for this week, and till next time.
Thanks, everyone. Subscribe.